Menahot Kuftet Amud Aleph. We're nearing the end of Masechet Menahot, which is exciting. We'll move to Chulin, B'ezrat Hashem. And this week we are going to be discussing an interesting sugya about something that isn't, at least to me, it's not well known. I think I may have heard of it before I reviewed it through this, but it certainly wasn't something that I was too familiar with. And that's the idea that during Beit Sheni, specifically during the era of the Chashmonaim, there was a temple that was functioning in Egypt, and it's not clear that there was a problem with that temple in the pure halachic sense. And it's a subject of machloket. The temple was called the Temple of Ananias in English, Beit Chonyo in the language of the Mishnah. Beit HaMikdash. And we're going to touch on the halachic question of, is it valid? How did they do it? If it was valid, is it Avodah Zarah, is it not Avodah Zarah? We're going to touch on that. But really use that as a segue into an Agadata, which is interpreted in the Yerushalmi in a rather shocking way. And we'll see various midrashim that try to address that. So let's start with the Gemara Menachot, and then we'll backtrack into the Kahati here to learn a little bit about the historical background. So the Mishnah Menachot Daf Kuf Ter Amud Aleph says as follows: HaKohanim sheshimshu bebeit Chonyo lo yishamshu b'mikdash b'Yerushalayim. So any priests or Kohanim who served in Beit Chonyo, and again we'll talk in more detail a bit about what exactly was this Beit Chonyo, but it wasn't in Israel. They are disqualified from serving then in the Beit HaMikdash. And you don't even have to say if they do davar acher, which is avodah zarah. As if you have a kohen that's a kohen for avodah zarah, that disqualifies him.
Isn't usually referred to pork?
In this context, I believe it refers to avodah zarah. At least that's how Rashi understands it.
I mean, it
also doesn't make sense to say and kal v'chomer pork.
It's
but
definitely
yes.
used often for pigs.
Oh, but there's a lot of midrashim that deal with the whole idea that, for example, that with the siege, Roman siege, that they sent the pork up the. And it stuck its claws in the wall, and there's obviously Beit Hashmonai and sacrificing pork and whatever. There's the whole thing with pork. Pork is an issue.
Also, one of the possible reasons why acher became acher.
Right.
That
story of the pig at the end, that in the context of that story, the message is that they decreed against Greek wisdom. So actually, last week we talked about that. So that's good. Yeah.
Does this become
as Greek wisdom?
Is that too high bar?
Last week was a good ending. It was a good ending.
Great ending.
Yeah.
Set very high bar last week.
Highly recommend last week's recording.
Also the crunching. Very good.
Okay. Okay, and so a kohen that serves in a temple of Avodah Zarah is for sure disqualified from the Avodah Beit Mikdash. How do we know that? Shneimar, it says in Melachim, lo ya'alu kohanei abamot el mizbach Hashem b'Yerushalayim ki im achlu matzot b'kerev achehem. Okay, so the kohanim who served in the bamot are not allowed to go to the Beit HaMikdash, but they are allowed to eat the matzot amongst their brethren. Harei elu kevalei mumin. So this teaches that kohanim who serve in a temple of Avodah Zarah, their halachic status is like one who has a mum, which means chokin v'ochlin v'lo makrivim. Right, they're allowed to eat truma maser and all the gifts.
You usually give them a job in one of the leshachot around the.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But they're not allowed to actually serve. They're disqualified from service. Okay. Again, the halachic component of this concerns us less.
It's really bizarre though, because if this Beit HaMikdash is allowed, then why the Kohanim not allowed to serve in the Beit HaMikdash?
Wow. Baruch shekivanta. Great question. Okay, good. That's the Gemara's question. Okay. Ve'en tzarich lomar davar acher. Okay. Midika'amar ein tzarich lomar davar acher. From the fact that you said for sure avodah zarah is the kohanim are disqualified. Michlal de Beit Chonyo lav avodah kochavim. Because you wouldn't say kohanim that serve in Beit Chonyo are disqualified, and for sure avodah zarah, unless it wasn't considered avodah zarah. Right? To your question. So the Gemara concludes from this, Tanya Kamandamar Beit Chonyo lav avodat kohanim hu. So therefore, this Mishnah.
Kochavim.
What did I say?
Kohanim.
Kochavim, thank you. That it's clear that this Mishnah teaches, according to the opinion, that Beit Chonyo was not considered avodat kochavim. What does that mean? Tanya, it's in the Braita. Otash shana shemet Shimon HaTzadik. So Shimon HaTzadik was, he lived during the times of Beit Sheni, and he was the Kohen Gadol. So the year that he died, Amar lahen shanazu hu met. So he said, the year that he died, this year he, as a euphemism for I, am going to die. Amru lo minayin ataydeah. So they said to him, how do you know you're going to die this year? So Amar lahen kol yom kippurim nizdamen li zaken echad levush levanim v'nitatef levanim ונכנס עמי ויצא עמי. So Shimon HaTzadik says every year there's an elderly man who is clothed in white clothes and he's mitatef, like it's talit, he's covered in white. He comes into the Kodesh HaKodashim with me and he comes out of the Kodesh HaKodashim with me every year. Shana zu, this year, Nizdaman nizaken echad levush chorim, that an old man wearing black appeared. Mitatef chorim, he was covered in black. V'nichnas imi v'lo yatzah imi, and he came into the Kodesh HaKodashim, but then he didn't come out with me. Therefore, I know I'm going to die this year. So after Sukkot, he got sick for 7 days and he died. And in mourning, the rest of the Kohanim did not say the Shem HaMeforash. The Meforashim deal with what does that mean? Not for now. When he was actually on his deathbed, Amar lahem, he said to them, Chonyo b'ni yishamesh tachtai. So right, he's on his deathbed. He says, who's going to be the next Kohen Gadol? So he says, my son Chonyo. So Chonyo had a brother Shimi, who was also Shimon Tzadik's son, and he was jealous. It's kind of the Yaakov, we're switching the hands here, that Shimon Tzadik appointed the younger son to be the Kohen Gadol. So the older son, who was 2.5 years older, was jealous of him. So what did he do? Amar lo, bo ve'alamedcha seder avodah. So the older brother said to the younger brother, okay, you don't know exactly how you're going to be the Kohen Gadol. I know the laws. Let me come teach you the laws. Hilbishu be'unkeli ve'chagro be'tziltzul. So basically, he dressed him in clothes that a woman wears. Okay? Emido etzel hamizbech, and he stood his younger brother next to the altar. He said to all the Kohanim who were gathered there, nadar ze v'kiyem la'uvato. So see what this, talking about his brother, what this guy swore to his wife and has fulfilled. Right, that he swore to his wife that he would, when he became the Kohen Gadol, that he would wear her belt and her, or whatever these words are. In other words, he tricked his brother into wearing these clothes which are not the Bigdei Kohen and not befitting, and then embarrassed him in front of all the other Kohanim. So what happened? Bikshu echav hakohanim la'argo. So then Chonyo, the younger brother, they all wanted to kill him because they thought that he had done something to besmirch the honor of the Kehuna Gdola. So he ran away, and they chased him. Halach le'Alexandria shel Mitzrayim. So he fled to Alexandria in Egypt. Ubana sham mizbeach ve'elash alav l'shum avodat kochavim. Okay, so he built an altar in Alexandria and he dedicated it to Avodah Zarah, essentially from the trauma of this incident. Okay, and when the Chachamim heard about this incident, Amru mazeh shelo yarad la. So if Shim'i, the older brother, who never actually was the Kohen Gadol, but was just spurned from being Kohen Gadol, acted so radically as to embarrass his brother and get him, almost killed. So this teaches you the danger in giving somebody power, that if he would go to such lengths and he didn't even ever get it, that someone who actually has it, be careful trying to kind of mess with his territory. That's what Rabbi Meir learns from this story. Amal Rabbi Yehuda, and the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Meir, you're wrong. It was a little bit different. That when Shimon HaTzadik died and said, the younger son, Chonyo, will be Kohen Gadol, Chonyo, out of humility, said, I refuse because I have an older brother. But then, as time passed, when Chonyo regretted that decision and ended up deciding that he did want to be the Kohen Gadol, so Amar lo bo l'meducha seder avodah. And now it's Chonyo is teaching Shimi, it's the other way around. The younger brother is teaching the older brother how to be the Kohen Gadol. So now Chonyo, the younger brother, embarrassed Shimi, the older brother, who was acting as Kohen Gadol, by tricking him into dressing up in women's clothes. The opposite of Rabbi Meir's version. What happened? Now the brothers wanted to kill the older brother. And the older brother said, my younger brother lied to me and tricked me into doing all of this. Okay? So now they turned on Chonyo and tried to chase him. Okay, so and basically Chonyo fled not because they thought he was dressing in women's clothes, but because they realized that he had tricked his brother into wearing women's clothes. So he ran away to Alexandria. Okay, alach Alexandria Mitzrayim u'bana sham mizbeach ve'ela alav l'shem shamayim. And this is the key point. Rabbi Yehuda says that he fled to Alexandria, he established his temple, but he dedicated it l'shem shamayim and not l'shem avodat kochavim. Shneimar, and there's a pasuk that says, "Bayom hu yeh mizbeach laHashem betoch eretz Mitzrayim." It says, "Nishayah, there will be an altar for Hashem in Eretz Mitzrayim, otzeva etzel gvula laHashem." Uksheshamu chachamim, and when the chachamim heard of this, badavar amru umazeh sheberach mimena. So now they said, the lesson is that Chonyo initially, out of humility, said, "I don't want that position because it should go to my older brother." But then, even though someone who was humble enough to flee from the honor, then went and acted the way that he acted. So, so how much more so someone who's actually in power and wanted it from the get-go, is it something that's dangerous to try to take away from them? Okay? So just to finish the Gemara, and then we'll go back. So Tanya Amar Rabbi Shua ben Parachia. So it was taught, Rabbi Shua ben Parachia said, "B'tchila kol ha'omer aleh la ani kofto v'notno lifnei ha'ari." So he said, in the beginning, before I became Rabbi Shua ben Chacham the Zukim, he was in charge of his Gadol. He was Gadol Ador. So he said, in the beginning, if someone told me Alel, I'd go be in charge, be the top Gadol Ador. I would have tied him up and put him in front of a lion, because that's how much I wanted to flee from the honor and the responsibility of being the leader. Aval ata, he says, reflecting on himself, now that I am in charge, anyone who tells me to give up my power, I would pour boiling hot water on him. And he brings an example of Shaul, that initially Shaul, right, he hid behind the vessels, but then eventually the power got to his head what that means, but assuming it's not a mental illness or anything like that, but that he eventually, he tried to kill David. That's how much he was so unwilling to give up the power that he originally never wanted. So again, the ethical message of this whole sugya is around the danger of power and people being in power, and to tread carefully and to understand the power corrupts, etc. But the key point for us is that there's a machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who lived a few hundred years after this Beit Chonyo, about what it was. Was it a temple that was dedicated to Hashem, or was it a temple that was dedicated to Israel? So we flip back for a second. So Perush Kehati gives a little bit of the historical background. So if you skip to the 5th line where it says Harambam after this kind of wide line. So Harambam beperusho lemishnatenu mevi et inyan chonyo kedivrei Rabbi Yehuda. So the Rambam in his Perush Mishnayot, so he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda. V'hu mosif, and he adds, Ashebana bait ba'Alexandria b'tzurat Beit HaMikdash u'bana mizbeach. Since Rabbi Yehuda said it was a Beit Hashem, or dedicated to Shem Shamayim, so Rambam adds that it was built as a copy of the Beit HaMikdash. And that was the point of it. And he built an altar there like the Beit HaMikdash. Beram lefi shemisupar b'sefer Milchamot leYosef ben Matityahu. And then Kati adds, but according to Wars of Josephus, right, which is a historical document, the historical source, lo chonyo beno shel Shimon HaTzadik bana et habayit, ela chonyo acher, shaya mibnei banav shel Shimon HaTzadik. So according to Josephus, this Onias or Chonyo was Shimon HaTzadik's grandson and not his son, which is he's his son according to the Gemara, etc., etc. Skipping the parentheses, לפי המקורות שהזכרנו נבנה בית חוניו כ-230 שנה לפני חורבן בית שני. Okay, and based on these sources, this temple was built around 230 years before the Churban. The Churban was in 70, so the temple was built, was that 160 BCE, roughly.
Why would Josephus be any more authoritative on this than
Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir?
Yeah.
Because he was there in that time, no?
No, he wasn't.
No, you're right.
He wasn't there
Josephus
BC?
is hundreds of years later.
He writes in the end of he writes around 70. He writes even after.
Right. I mean, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir lived another, 100 years after that, shortly after.
Josephus was the commander.
But I'm saying it's like
I think scholars would assume that,
negligible
right, but I think
after,
scholars would assume that
they trust Josephus more.
Yeah, and it also, I think, it's clear that there's a point to these stories, which is the message of the danger of
I agree.
power.
I'm just saying it's not like, whether he was the son or grandson. Like I'm saying
Maybe the
based on,
rabbis knew just as well as Josephus. Yeah,
It's an equal amount of like couple hundred years earlier. It's like
fair enough.
Well,
Fair enough.
you do see another case, especially when it comes to the Chulban, that there is a heavy reliance on Josephus, even within our sources.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's considered nearly the sole commentator, if you like, on the whole era.
Right. I mean,
but I
your
think
point
things
is
that are closer to the time of the Churban is, there's good reason to, because meaning that's when he was operating as, historian for the Romans.
Yes, but he was. But think of it also as a national backstabber. The guy was the commander of the north. And he literally.
he also had an agenda.
Yeah. No, of course there's an agenda. That's Barur.
Fair enough. Good point. And then just to finish off, Kati ben Achrav Odei Espicinus Vespasian Kamashinim Achrav. In other words, that he actually claims that this temple of Anias was actually destroyed after the Beit HaMikdash. And it was in Alexandria, in Egypt, so it existed for a couple hundred years, this temple. And we saw, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it was built as a replica of the Beit HaMikdash and dedicated L'Shem Shamayim. And that's why, according to our Mishnah, the way the Gemara understands our Mishnah, it's not considered Avodat Kochavim. Okay? Let's understand a little bit more about the halachic concept and then get into kind of the meat of this. So the Mishnah in Megillah and Daf Tet Amud Bet, back to the second page, the Mishnah says, En ben Shiloh liYerushalayim. There's no difference between Shiloh, which the Mishkan was for 360-something years, and the eventual resting place in Yerushalayim. Ela shebeshiloh ochlin kodshim kalim maser sheni b'chol haroeh. Yerushalayim lefanim min hachoma. That in Shiloh you could eat certain korbanot if you could even see it, and in Yerushalayim you had to be inside the wall. V'chan kodshei kodashim nechalen lefanim min hakalim. But the kodashim, according to both, had to be eaten inside the actual.
Shiloh is in Israel?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where was it?
Yes. Where was Shiloh?
A little north of
Samaria.
North of Benjamin, actually.
Yeah.
For 100 during the Tkufat of the.
So was Jerusalem.
That's
Yeah,
where.
it's
It's a little north of
That's where
For hundreds of years.
Shmuel Navi started
yeah.
his career.
Yeah, it was during the Shoftim. It was there. And all that,
Actually, it was there for hundreds of years.
Well, yeah, at a few spots. There's more than just Shiloh was, if you like, nearly the last one before moving into Yerushalayim.
Before Beit Oved Doma. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Discuss
Kedusha.
after, but there's discuss after, but there's really cool stuff about Shiloh in terms of locating where the Mishkan was. But we'll discuss that after.
Yeah.
The church.
Oh, I mean where it is today. Okay. Kedushat Shiloh yesh acharei heter. Kedushat Yerushalayim ein acharei heter. And the other difference is that the Shiloh was consecrated to the point where you couldn't offer bamot. You couldn't offer korbanot like in your backyard when the Mishkan was in Shiloh. But after Shiloh, it was moved from Shiloh, so then that was permitted again. But once it got to Jerusalem, even after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, you're not allowed to offer in bamot anymore. And that's what the Mishnah says. Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Shamati shemakrivin beveit chonyo bizman hazeh. So Rabbi Yitzchak says, I heard that they're offering korbanot in this Beit Chonyo, this temple in Egypt, even today. Kasavar, he reasoned two things. One, Beit Chonyo lav Beit Avodah Zarah. So he must have held, first of all, that it wasn't Avodah Zarah. The Kasavar, Kedusha Rishona Kicha L'Shata V'lo Kicha L'Tid Lavo. And he also must have held that after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, the permission to offer korbanot outside of Yerushalayim came back into effect, and not that once the Beit HaMikdash was built, even after it was destroyed, you couldn't offer korbanot elsewhere. Okay? And his drasha was, Ki dichtiv, Ki lo batem arata ela menucha v'ela nachala, menucha ze Shiloh, nachala is Yerushalayim, makish nachala menucha, ma menucha, yesh acharei heter, af nachala yesh acharei heter. Just like Shiloh, once it was destroyed, the bamot were permitted again, so to Yerushalayim, once it was destroyed, the bamot were permitted again. And since in Egypt, they were offering at the Shem Shamayim, it was a bama, and it was a time after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and therefore it was permitted. That was what Rabbi Yitzchak says.
It was made when it was still standing there.
Correct. That's correct. Absolutely. So, Amrule, Amarta. So they said to, this is funny actually, they said to Rabbi Yitzchak, did you say that? Amarlu lo. So he said, no, I never said that. So Amar. So Amar Rava Elohim. So Rava says, like, by God, Amra u'mirna le'minei. He said it, and I heard it from him. What's he talking about now that he didn't say it? So Rava's arguing with Rabbi Yitzchak about whether he said something he says he didn't say. Okay. Umatam kahadarbe. So the assumption then is that he did say it and retracted. Okay. So why did he retract? Mishum kushid Rav Mari, because Rav Mari asks a question. The motive Rav Mari kedushat shilo yesh achar heter kedushat shleim ech achar heter ve'od tznan miksheba Yerushalayim nesru abanot v'lay alem od heter ve'hi hayta nechala. Basically, that the consensus in halacha is that Yerushalayim, even after it was destroyed, there were no more bamot allowed. And once Rabbi Yitzchak heard and learned that, so then he retracted his statement that Beit Chonyo is considered acceptable. But note that the reason he retracts and says, okay, maybe Beit Chonyo is a problem, is because bamot are not allowed outside of Yerushalayim. Not that Beit Chonyo was a problem in and of itself as a place of worship. It's just that you can't do shchutei chutz. You can't offer korbanot outside the Beit HaMikdash.
Two other problems, if we're already mentioning it. Number one, it's in Egypt. Returning to Egypt, the whole idea of, it's a little, it's an issue.
Deported though.
And, even if you can claim that there is shchutei chutz outside, it's outside Eretz Yisrael even, like for crying out loud. You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So look at what Tosfot says to this, okay? How is this whole thing even? We talking about, the Beit Chonyo, it's an avodah kachavim, not avodah kachavim. You're offering a korban outside the Beit HaMikdash, outside of Eretz Yisrael. What's the idea? That everybody in Beit Chonyo, Tosfot claims, everyone who did the actual worship was a non-Jew, and there's no Isser. It's only a problem if a Jew does a sacrifice outside, and since they did Nedarim and Nedavot, so a non-Jew is allowed to offer those. Even in the Beit HaMikdash, a non-Jew is allowed to come and offer those. So therefore there was no Isur of Shchutei Chutz in Beit Chonyo, and they offered it L'Shem Shamayim, and they just did it within the bounds of Halacha.
They were serving
that's in parentheses. Interesting. Because it says I love the same. Yeah, I think that was. I think that's not the Girsa. The Girsa is the Shem Shamayim. So that's interesting. That they offered it the Shem Shamayim specifically. Anyway, Tosfot lived. If you think Josephus and Rabbi Yehuda Meir lived a long time after to understand how the logistics of the korbanot worked. So Tosfot.
Yeah, but Tosfot is. Tosfot is doing the usual. Function of trying to resolve.
Sure.
Yeah, trying to resolve things that.
I'm not aware of a source before Tosfot that he can rely on to say this. That's all. But that is the conclusion he reaches to resolve the problem. Yeah, that everybody who worshipped there was. Okay, all that for me was introduction to the part that I find. Is to me the more interesting idea, and that's this Yerushalmi Yoma. So we came to learn a lot about the temple of Chonyo as an aside through the story of Shimon HaTzadik. That he told a story of when he was Kohen Gadol that there used to be a Zaken Echad that used to come into the Kodesh Kodashim and come out from the Kodesh Kodashim. What's the problem with that story?
Nobody to go in.
Yeah, I thought no one's allowed in the Kodesh Kodashim. It was the Zaken Echad.
That's not entirely true. Bedek Habayit.
Okay, but they went in like a box. They couldn't look at anything. It's very
not
difficult.
on Yom Kippur.
They didn't just stroll in with him. It was in a box. It was like a separate. What do you mean?
If somebody needed to be taken care of, mended inside.
They went in. They were lowered
Definitely, no
inside
one
a
else
box.
can go in to do the avoda with him.
Yeah, it wasn't like they just strolled in Yom Kippur with him.
Right. He's talking in the context of Yom Kippur and doing. 40 shana shimeh. Okay, the Yerushalmi. It starts out similar to our Gemara. 40 shana shimeh Shimon HaTzadik et Yisrael. Okay, so he was the Kohen Gadol for 40 years. Bikun Agdola. Uv'shana achorona is last year. Amar lahem b'shana azot ani met. So now it's not the euphemism of he is dying. He says I'm dying. I'm going to die this year. Amru lo me'echan ata yodeh. How do you know? Amar lahem kol shana v'shana she'ayiti nichnas bekodshei hakodashim. Hazaken echad lavush levanim v'atuf levanim nichnasim yivyotzei. Right, same thing. There used to be this. Every year, an old man would be dressed in white. He would come in with me and live with me. So it doesn't mention here that he was wearing black. It's a slight difference to what we saw in Menahot. That this man came in with me, but he didn't come out with me. Ba'on komi Rabbi Abahu. It was asked before Rabbi Abahu. V'haktiv v'chol adam yiyeh bo'ol moed b'vo'ol lechaper b'kodesh ad seto. I thought no other person is allowed to come into the Kodesh HaKodashim on Yom Kippur. What is Shimon HaTzadik talking about? Nizdaman nizaken echad. And furthermore, if you're going to tell me Okay, and you're, it's a kenechad. He's talking about an angel or some, heavenly being. It's not really a... Okay, afilu otan shekatuv bahen in Yechezkel in the Maaseh Merkava udmut pneihem pnei adam lo yu be'ol moed. That we have a teaching that even malachim were not allowed in the ol moed when the Kohen Gadol went in. No person and no angel was allowed. So who was the zaken echad? Amar Lon, Rabbi Abahu says, Ma amar li dahava barinash. Why are you assuming that this was a person? Ani omer hakadosh baruch hu haya.
Why did he
That's
Why
quite
did
a lot.
You're religious.
wait, why did he mention the famous Braita? אמר רבי ישמעאל?
Which breta?
אמר רבי ישמעאל, פעם אחת נכנסתי להקטיר קטורת לפני ולפנים, וראיתי הקטריאל. Continue?
The...
What is that?
Okay, yeah,
What is that? That is exactly the same thing.
okay, yeah.
The song also.
That one has a song.
How does the song go?
No, I'm not.
With the chewing, with the crunching.
Want me to sing it? Nah. But yeah,
Uh,
very famous Braita.
Yeah. So here, so that's the question is obvious. Okay, so the Vaikor Rabba, בשנה שמת בה שמעון הצדיק, אמר להם בשנה זו הוא מת, אמרו לו מניין אתה יודע, אמר להם בכל שנה ושנה יצא כן אחד לבוש לבנים ומוטף לבנים, נכנס עמי ויצא עמי, שנה זו נכנס עמי ולא יצא עמי, אמר רבי אבאו, ומי אומר שאדם היה, ולא הקדוש ברוך הוא בכבודו היה נכנס עמו ויוצא עמו. אמר רבי אבאו, וכהן גדול לא אדם היה. Rabbi Abahu adds to this and says, but the Kohen Gadol himself is not even considered a person. Ela ke'ahu de'amar Rabbi Pinchas. Rather, there's a teaching of Rabbi Pinchas. B'sha'ah she'ruach HaKodesh sharui alav. When the Kohen Gadol went into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, he was enveloped with this Ruach HaKodesh. Hayu panav bo'orot kalapidim alav. His face was burning with these fires. Hadu dichtiv, and it says in Malachi, ki siftei Kohen yishmeru da'at. That it transformed the Kohen Gadol into some kind of angelic something, and he left the categorization of Adam. Or at least that seems to be what he's saying.
Fits really well with the shir on Wednesday at Sruli's house. It was about being a shaliach in general and how the Kohanim really are like not supposed to appear as humans in some sense, but are really just supposed to be like an extension, like a robot, almost robotic extension of a Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Yeah, you think of the Birkat Kohanim in the Mikdash where he's not covered, because now to look at because he's there standing there, in front of the entire nation, spreading his hands forward and then saying Hashem Mfolash, and everybody's like on the floor.
He also has a song.
Or like Moshe Rabbeinu, Shechina in the bears, Mitech Grainai. That's more like Shleach, I guess. Anyway. But he's saying he wasn't an Adam.
Is he, right, in that moment
He's not, what did he say?
he's not a man. He's more than a man.
Wait, Adam.
Is that from something? He's more than. There's some movie. So this statement of Rabbi Abahu appears in the Yerushalmi, it appears in Vaikor Rabba, and it appears in Psikta Rabbati. It appears in various midrashim. It's not just some kind of. It appears in various different places. Okay, and the Psikta Rabbati here just brought just to kind of add to this. So why aren't the angels allowed to go into the Kodesh Kodashim? So we'll say that all the angels, they fled from the Kohen Gadol. Right, that includes the angels. That they used to, the Kohen Gadol in that moment, right, his face is burning with this fire, he transforms into some non-man. The angels, they can't enter, right? They even the angels, the only one who can enter is the Zaken Echad. So, just to conclude, so the Marzu says something. I don't want to get too deep into it, but he says kushahu. So he says this is a problem. So the question is, how can a man come in with the Kohen Gadol? And so the Marzu adds, "Uchmo shekatuv b'Daniel perek zayin, v'atik yomin yativ levushay keteleg chiyur v'sa'ar rashay ke'emer naki," that in Daniel he has a vision of the Atik Yomin, right, the ancient one, the Ancient of Days, sitting on a throne, and he has clothes that are pure, like white snow, and his hair is wool, etc. So that's the idea of the Lavush Levanim, right? That it's this kind of whatever this means, this personification of God Himself embodied on a throne in white. V'chein ra Shimon HaTzadik levush levanim. So the Maharal says that's what Shimon HaTzadik is describing here. Uma shelo tired she'aya malach, and why did he go all the way to Hashem and not just say that it was an angel? So we saw this, right? It's because muvah b'shem Yerushalmi v'chenu b'psikta u'malachei hasheret borchim l'fanav v'chol adam yeh b'ol moed elu malachei hasheret u'bnut mehem b'nei adam, that Ayin Sham, that the angels weren't allowed in either. So that's why Rabbi Abahu kind of is forced into this corner to say it must have been Hashem. And then just outside, very quickly, the Ramban, he kind of wraps up to bring this whole thing as a proof. He's actually dealing with this question of, it's unclear, one of the Bigdei Kuhuna, which one is being described when it says, V'nishma kolo bevo'o el HaKodesh. It says the Kohen Gadol's voice should be heard when he comes into the Kodesh Kodashim. So the Ramban says, that the voice, in his opinion, is the bells that used to be on the hem of the robe.
There was another reasoning for those bills, because since they were Kohanim, they weren't worthy, and they went in and didn't come out. So that to make sure that to pull them out in some way, shape, or form, and to make sure that they know that the guy's still alive. They had the bells on the bottom of on the bottom of the robe,
to hear it,
creating noise.
Yeah,
and they were barefoot, obviously, so you not necessarily hear one shred in and out of the Kodesh Kodashim.
Right. In case you didn't hear the thumping of the bottom.
No, not necessarily, but okay. I'm not a pathologist, but
Raman says that there was no other purpose, essentially.
There's no other what? Sorry.
She'in v'hem tzerech b'lavish, except for this.
Right.
That's what we always learned growing up, is that it was to people to hear him coming.
That's what he's saying.
Right. Exactly. So he weaves in this idea of the lo chol adam yeh lo yeh b'ol moed, what we just learned about, and he quotes these midrashim that we discussed. So just to kind of see what this kind of alluded to what Nathanael said. So if you skip the fourth line from the bottom, the fifth line from the bottom, so it says v'chein b'tzeto latzet birshut v'sheyodea hadavar kedei shiuchlu meshartei hamelech lashuv lefanav. Right, it needed to be known that he was going in and out, etc. Uvepirkei hechalot yadua ze ha'inyan. Right, in the midrash hechalot about this whole, there's a whole tradition that's developed around the different levels that you can go up into heaven and back down, and this whole concept of needing to kind of announce yourself at each step, and this whole process and ceremony. That's what the bells were coming to kind of serve. That the Kohen Gadol was acting in that capacity in the Kodesh Kodashim. So yes.
By the way, speaking of the whole idea of Shimon HaTzadik and the image and imagery, the famous midrash where about Alexander the Great, that the midrash says that when he came into Eretz Yisrael, he met with Shimon HaTzadik. And there were the Kutim trying to take care of the Beit Hamikdash or Yerushalayim or whatever, and then he stopped them and he says this guy's image was in front of me every single time that I won my battles.
Right.
So if you think of his sons. By the way, Egypt was under Ptolemy, and Yerushalayim was under the Seleucids. So you don't know if there's also a political agenda behind, having a equivalent of the Beit Mikdash in Egypt. There were a heck of a lot of Jewish soldiers, by the way, serving under both armies. Needs to be said. There was the famous famous fort in the smack in the middle of the Nile on this island. which was manned by a Jewish force. Very famous story. So they were connected with that Mikdash Chonio. By the way, very interesting. But yeah, already mentioning the whole imagery in the Shimon Tzaddik. You gotta remember that one too.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
The Rambam definitely thinks that Rabbi Abba was a kofar, right?
I mean, we'll just conclude with Rabbi Abba was interpreting Shimon Tzaddik, right? So I don't think there's any
So
way
he just
to.
thinks that Rabbi Shimon Tzaddik is.
I don't think there's any way to understand Rabbi Abba who he's very explicit on how he understands it. But Shimon Tzaddik himself, you know,
Yeah,
you
but
could interpret his idea of Nizdaman Nizaken Echad as being not necessarily, you know.
you could take almost any non-literal interpretation and not run into the same problems that you run into when you say it's God in human form.
I wonder what that reminds us of.
Yeah, well.
Not that I'm trying to claim that no important rabbis ever believed that God could
I mean, look, it's in the Torah.
express himself.
Look, it's in the Torah, right?
And obviously you
The
have
back
the
of
whole
the
idea of
kind of.
לא, ויראו את אלוקי ישראל ותחת רגליו כמעשה יספר חצי מהשמיים לתואר.
Well, what is the first two chapters of Yerei Cheskel?
Yeah, but
What does he exactly see there?
Well, I mean, but there's a reason you're not allowed to be Dorish Maseh.
we're too many people to be talking about this.
I mean, one person.
Next time, only one person's allowed to come, and he has to be learned, and then maybe we can talk about it.
Already understand it on his own.
Who's the most closest here to the age of 40? I'm already 37, so.
There you go. So, it's all right. You'll learn it on all of our apps.
So,
Well, thanks for leaving us with